All right, welcome to the show. This is the Shadow the Script podcast. I'm your host, Jared May. This is the Week 12 college football episode. Now, if you can't tell already, if you're following the podcast, we are now exclusively a college football podcast, and I would say by undetermined popular demand, if I can phrase it in such a way. But in 2026, there will be some more of a network outlook to it, is what is planned. So, don't discount the NFL just yet, but 90% of this channel will be college football analysis. So I'm really excited to do it, and I'll tell you why. Because Week 11, boy, oh boy, me and the medical guy really hit our stride. And I say that in a humble way, but projections, it all lined up perfectly. The A&M prediction, the Texas Tech prediction, the Alabama prediction, everything just seemed to go as planned. And then the week prior before that, to pat myself on the back, going 4 for 4 on projections there, on key matchups and things like that. And then of course the STS poll. So, you'll see it up on the screen here in a little bit, but our Week 12 edition of the STS poll, there's a lot to get into here, because now we're about to get further into November, obviously, which means towards the end of the regular season. Week 14, everybody's last game is the end of November, right after Thanksgiving. And then we go into the selection committee and the conference championships, excluding Notre Dame. And then we get into the college football playoffs. So just imagining how long and extensive the season is. I mean, we thought the season started yesterday. Well, it's already almost middle November. I mean, the rut's about to be done down here in East Texas. But all that to say, before we got into it, before we gut into the STS poll and give my analysis, if you are a first-time listener, and I feel like there might be a couple new people here, we had over 600 or over 500 views or so on a Texas Tech BYU clip. I really want to say thank you guys for that. And luckily, we got it right. I mean, it's not like we didn't know what we were talking about, but with all eyes on, I was texting Jacob, and I was like, hey, man, you better hope to God you are correct, because this is a make or break take, with all these people coming in here and visiting the channel. And but I do just want to say sincerely thank you guys for tuning into the channel. I know we're an independent group, and we're looking to grow and become quite the network. So if it is your first time, you can find us at Shadow the Script on TikTok. On YouTube, on Spotify, and on Apple Podcast. By searching that, you will find us there. You'll see the golden logo with the STS label. You can listen or watch on Spotify. You can listen on Apple Podcasts, and you can watch on YouTube. Additionally, STS segment clips. There's a playlist for that on YouTube. Those, if you can't catch the full hour or so episode, then you dive into the 3 to 5 minute clips, sometimes longer if we're doing like key projections, and just put the whole clip in there. And I think you guys like those a lot, and I'm glad that you do. I think it's perfect. I don't, me, myself, for what I do for my actual job, I'm constantly moving around, so having an hour to do something is difficult, but getting that key emphasis on what you really want to listen to from each episode, you can pinpoint it. So excited to do that. And then, of course, on the socials, TikTok, Instagram, and X, you can find us at Shadow the Script or STS_pod. But anyway, thank you guys for tuning in. We got a lot to cover for today. I've got some notes. This is an episode where you don't want to go without them. A lot of times I'm kind of raw dogging it and just going off memory. That is how my brain works. So if you ask me what Bryce Harper's batting average was in 2021, I could tell you. It's just I have that kind of a memory. But this one there's so much chaos in it that I felt like, okay, I don't want to get anything wrong here. Let's throw some notes in there. All right, here it is on your screen, the STS poll. Now, this is the Week 12 edition, and, per usual, if you're, I like to start out with just outside of the script. And for those listening, I'm going to do a much better job of outlining the numbers. That way you guys know where each team is ranked if you're not able to watch. So, just outside of the script, we're going to go in here, and we're going to talk about Tennessee. And Tennessee is sitting at 6-3. And I debated putting them into the top 25 because obviously, as an SEC team, we've watched a lot of their games. They've played Georgia. They've played Ole Miss. They've played Oklahoma. They played all these different teams where, okay, we want to have our eyes on. We want to watch this. This is that afternoon slot. This is a game we want to tune into. Joey Aguilar's balling out. They had a very exciting game versus Georgia. Probably top 3 games thus far. We had another candidate this week for one of the best games, and I would say that was Indiana and Penn State. But when I look at Tennessee, I put them just outside of the script. Obviously, this is my opinion, but I find it obvious. In North Texas, Nebraska, Cincinnati, and Houston, is Tennessee beating those teams? Up front, yes, I believe so. I believe Tennessee walks a dog on them. You can argue they do the same thing to the ACC teams. We'll get into the ACC later. But let's look at Tennessee's losses. I mean, they lost to Georgia 44-41. Like I said, candidate for top 3 game of the year. They lost to Bama 37-20. That was the outlier. We were like, okay, we're separating the boys from the men. Bama is clearly a better football team. Then they lost to Oklahoma 33-27. And so the narrative around Tennessee that I had framed, that I had phrased was that obviously their offensive firepower is dominant in the SEC. They're going to score points on you. Well, their defense, on the other hand, has, allowing 33 points to Oklahoma, whose offense is, if you've watched those games, is primarily lackluster and kind of lethargic. That just wasn't a good sign for me. And then, of course, having the lead and the control on Georgia, they didn't play Ole Miss. I meant to say Alabama earlier, but on Georgia, having the lead and having control of most of that game, I'm thinking to myself, how do you blow it? And so 44 points on Georgia, I didn't like that at all. And then against Bama, they got ran out the building by 37 points allowed. So defense is a major concern, but I see the offensive firepower, and I've watched them play, and I like their coach. I could just see them beating those teams from 23 to 25, just like clear as day. But I'm not about hypotheticals at the Shadow the Script podcast. Here at the STS Network, I'm about resume. You rank based on what they have done, not based on what you think they ought to do or you think they should be doing in the next 3 or 4 weeks. And I think that is the Shatter the Script mainstream media take of the week. Is we look at their AP poll rankings and it's like, well, why in the world is this team ranked and this team is not? North Texas is 8-1, so we're going to get into that. Another one just outside the script. I think this one's a little bit of kind of a stretch, but SMU was very exciting last year. Making it to the college football playoffs, and Jennings, the quarterback for SMU, played really well. This year they've kind of had a drop off. However, they did upset Miami prior to their bye week. So they've just kind of been stable at just outside the script. And we're going to get into kind of what they have the rest of the year. And honestly, they have 2 Big 12 games the rest of the year, which is a little odd. They lost 2 Big 12 games. They lost to Baylor and they lost to TCU, which those are not good losses. And we're not going to kid ourselves. And then they lost to Wake Forest. Well, Wake Forest played Georgia Tech super close. Don't quote me. I think they took them to OT. I think it was 30-29 Georgia Tech. Wake Forest also just beat Virginia. Granted, we'll get into that here in a second. Virginia's quarterback is out, and it's undisclosed as to what that injury is. But Wake Forest is not a beat-around team. They're actually a pretty decent football team. They're 6-3 this year. Same record as SMU. I mean, you can argue Wake Forest is just outside of the script, but I only like to put 4 in there to simplify things. And so the remaining games, they go to Louisville, California, and then they have a bye week. So, forecasting their schedule, I mean, I think SMU at 7-3 my projected record for them is 8-4. I mean, and that's not bad. Are they going to make it to the top 25? Probably not, but they could surprise and upset Louisville. So the ACC is kind of on a downfall right now, and that's kind of going to be like the emphasis on this poll. And then again, just outside the script, I'm still putting them in there just outside of the script as to be considered just because of how tough of a place it is to play at Iowa. Now, during the winter months, Iowa becomes a very, very difficult place to play because of weather implications. Just this past week, Oregon scores a game-winning touchdown or a game-winning field goal to win 18-16 versus Iowa. What did we say on the podcast last week? I said it's going to be ugly. I kind of want to say Iowa steals a win here, but then I said, you know what? I'm not going to overcomplicate this. This is going to be a low-scoring dogfight. Why the hell, like Jacob said, why the hell is it 7-3 in the fourth quarter? If Oregon gets a defensive turnover or something, they have cemented themselves with a W. And I said 21-17 would be the final. Well, 18-16 off of a game-winning field goal in the rain and the cold at Iowa is basically like going into World War I with no weapons. And you're like, well, am I in no man's land? Do I go left or do I go right? Am I a Kraut or am I an American? Which side am I going to choose? And so Oregon chose the winning side, obviously. And that was up for them to decide, is what I'm alluding to. What kind of team did Oregon want to be? And so I trusted Dan Lanning, and therefore, Iowa has played both Indiana and Oregon very close. They played Indiana within 5. They played Oregon within a last-minute field goal, and then they lost to Iowa State, a rivalry game earlier in the season, 16-13. So it's just what Iowa is. Are they going to be a top 25 at the end of the year? Well, the remaining games, they go at to USC. They're 15th on my poll. Then they play Michigan State at home, and then they go at Nebraska with no Dylan Raiola. And so I'm projecting them to be 8-4. I think they drop. I think it's an easy pick to say they drop a game to USC, but the next 2 games I think they can easily win. Only saying that because Nebraska doesn't have their starting quarterback. So a classic 8-4, 9-3-ish type year for Iowa where no one's talking about them, but it is a very difficult place to play, and you got to give them their flowers. Now, this one just outside the script, I put Tulane on here because of their most recent victory. And they played Memphis on Friday night. I don't know if you guys caught that game, but I put Tulane in here, but it's basically saying the group of 5 teams, these AAC conference teams, because check this out. My proposition, and I don't want to steal this from somebody else, but I did see it on X, but I've been thinking the same thing. These group of 5 teams are not going to win a national championship. So what is the point of putting them in the college football playoffs when they should just be playing each other in their own separate college football playoff? Let me outline this for you guys. Of the group of 5 teams, in the AAC conference, you've got North Texas, who I have ranked at number 25 at 8-1. They're 8-1. Tulane is 7-2. Tulane had a big victory earlier in the year against a team that has beaten ranked teams. South Florida is 7-2. They beat Florida earlier in the year. Memphis is 8-2. They beat Arkansas early in the year. Navy 7-2. Now this is the outlier. They're going to they lose to Notre Dame just like they lost to them last year, but they were undefeated going into last year's game versus Notre Dame. They were a 1-loss team going into Notre Dame this year. So, and that's your nationally televised game for Notre Dame. And so that's the AAC. You got 4 teams who are 7-2, 8-1, right? Going into the Mountain West Conference, you have UNLV 7-2, San Diego State 7-2, Hawaii 7-3, UConn 7-3, and Boise State 6-3. Who, if you forecast their schedule, they could finish, 8-4, 9-3. Then in the Sun Belt Conference, I think the AP poll has James Madison ranked, but James Madison's 8-1, and then Southern Miss is 7-2. That is, checks notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 teams. That is 12 teams that could be playing against one another in their own Group 5 college football playoff. That way, it's kind of like when I was in high school, we had 1 year where there was a big school playoff and a small school playoff. So we played the big school. We were considered on the small half. We played the big school, and we were competitive with them, but they went off to play a bigger team in the playoffs, and they won their state championship. We lost our state championship to Colleyville Covenant out of Waco. So it's to say like, hey, we're going to compete in our own category here. We were a really good team for a small school, but the big school, they were kicking the snot out of everybody else, and we were within 2 possessions of them. And so it's like, okay, obviously they have more students, that sort of thing, more NIL budget, more of this. That's the comparison I'm trying to make here. But I think that'd be a great idea, and I don't want that to be disrespectful to these teams. So, all right. Now, getting into the actual top 25, you got number 25, as I mentioned earlier, North Texas. Now, this is out of resume and out of respect to that resume. Going 8-1, I know they got 63 points put on them by South Florida, but outside of that, they have been kicking the snot out of everybody. And they've had some decent wins on their schedule. So I like them. Number 24, Nebraska. Are they going to stay there? No, absolutely not. But at the same time, they are 7-3. They got a dub over UCLA this week without their starting quarterback. I think based on their resume, I think they deserve to be within the top 25. But are they going to stay there? No. And that's the tier 5 that I was mentioning in my alluded tweet. It's basically saying the top 25 is very hierarchical. It's very tiered now that we've kind of gotten most of a glimpse of what every team is capable of, what they're made of. But outside the top 21 teams, it's just always going to fluctuate, and it's going to fluctuate even more. So number 25, North Texas. Number 24 is Nebraska. Number 23 is Cincinnati. And so in this hierarchy, I kind of put with Houston, Cincinnati, and Nebraska, right? With Houston being at number 22. One thing worth noting, why I like Nebraska, is Emmett Johnson is the catalyst to this Nebraska Cornhusker football team. He has put up monster numbers. I mean, if you go look at the numbers, it's like 100-plus rush yard game after 100-plus rush yard game. He's the absolute catalyst. And then when you paired that with Dylan Raiola, you had a dangerous Big Ten offense against teams that are not good, if that makes sense, within their Big Ten. Like the big time studs within the Big Ten, they did not win those games. Nebraska does not win big games yet. So, but against decent teams, above average teams, they're going to play well. They're going to score a lot of points. So, and they play everybody pretty decently close. But they got a Week 12 bye. They go at Penn State. That is a difficult game, no matter if Penn State is 3-6 or not. And they play Iowa at home in a rivalry game, but they get them at home. For Houston, their quarterback, Connor Wegman, they're going to be ranked at 8-2. They had a very, very close game against, I believe it was UCF. They won 30-27. And I think Connor Wegman, based on what I've been seeing the last 2 games, Connor Wegman needs to play a lot better if they're going to be considered a top dog. And what's crazy is they are 8-2 in the Big 12. I mean, Utah is 7-2, and I've got them ranked higher than Houston. So I just think Houston kind of plays with their food a little bit based off of the matchups that I've seen. But in retrospect, 5 interceptions in the last 2 games for Connor Wegman. Needs to clean it up. But overall, most of the year, he's played really well. And he had the most rushing yards in the team this past week. So he kind of made up for it on the ground. But something to consider going into their Week 12 bye, followed by TCU at home, and then they play at Baylor. Cincinnati is the last team on this list. They have a tough November coming up. And I did like them early on in the season as a Big 12 contender. I did project Utah to beat the crud out of them. That is exactly what happened. But they have a tough November schedule, and 2 out of 3, thankfully, are home games. But they have Arizona at home at 6-3. They have BYU at home 8-1, and they go at TCU 6-3. So 3 plus 500 opponents coming up. One of them is ranked within the top 15 on my STS poll, who just played Texas Tech and got absolutely clamped. So, but now going into the next tier. The next tier is basically it's the 2-loss ACC teams. It's 21 through 18. Number 21 is Pittsburgh. Number 20 is Virginia. Number 19 is Miami. And number 18 is Louisville. 21, Pittsburgh. They play Notre Dame this year. Here's my key emphasis with Pittsburgh. And I think, man, I say key emphasis because I don't want to get on a tangent here. But Pittsburgh's sitting at 7-2, and then they got an outlier on their schedule, which is College Game Day this weekend, Notre Dame. And if you hadn't seen it yet, the Pittsburgh coach basically came out and he was like, I don't care if we lose by 100 versus Notre Dame. We want to get as many wins as we possibly can, yes, but they're not in our conference. So whether we lose or not, it doesn't necessarily affect that we're still trying to play for an ACC championship. Is that not the freaking point I was trying to make last week if you tune into the episode? Is that not the point? I said I would love to interview, checks notes, Pittsburgh's head coach to see how he would feel about playing Notre Dame on their schedule, not the other way around. We can talk all day about Notre Dame fans and Notre Dame coaches saying, oh yeah, we handpick our schedule. We're not a part of it. We're an FBS independent, this, that, and the other. And we play all these Power 5 teams, Power 4 teams or whatever. And it's like, what about the other side? What about the other teams that have to play you on their schedule and what it means for them? Maybe there's a multiplier factor in here that says, well, there's no point in me, wasting bodies out there or coaching up an absolute firestorm against Notre Dame because, well, frankly, it doesn't matter if we lose or win because we're playing for a conference championship. You guys are not. You're just on our schedule to make us better or to give us a bigger challenge, if you will. But this is exactly what I was talking about. So they're playing College Game Day this weekend. There's other better games out there. They're going at Pittsburgh to play who is hosting Notre Dame. And they're going to poise this as this big-time matchup. And Notre Dame is probably going to blow their socks off because Pittsburgh doesn't give a shit. So that's something to keep an eye on. Again, with the selection committee coming up in December. Moving on to Virginia. Again, I can go on more of a tangent with that. But Virginia just lost to Wake Forest 9-16. And people are probably looking at it going, oh, Virginia is trash. Now, the last couple weeks, they have been begging to lose. Very, very close games with subpar opponents compared to their record. And they're just biting by. You're like, 30-20 win, 2-point differential win. Oh, overtime win versus this, that, and the other. But they were trailing during the game. Okay, this time 9-16 to Wake Forest, right? Well, their quarterback goes out with an injury, and it's listed everywhere as, I probably could have done more research on this, but their starting quarterback it has an undisclosed injury. It doesn't say what it is. And I found this astonishing because Wake Forest had 9 completions for 67 yards versus Virginia and won the football game. They also rushed 40 times. And the backup quarterback that came in for Virginia had 2 fumbles lost. I'm sure they were strip sack type fumbles. So leading up to their next couple of games, which we'll get into here in a second, because I want to do like an ACC projection analysis, it's going to be really key if their starting quarterback shows up or not, because that really paints us a picture if their starting quarterback is out for the next game or the next one. Number 19 is Miami at 7-2. Now, they had a very, very slow start against Syracuse in the first half. They were 28.5 point favorites for this game. And I think near halftime, it was like a 1-score game. I think it was 0-0 for like a quarter and a half. And they pulled away in the second half to win 38-10. But there still is this looming regression with Miami of these past 2 years where towards the back half of the year, their performance just dips. It was last year with Cam Ward. It's this year with Carson Beck. They lost that game versus SMU. 2 weeks ago, they lost it to Louisville on a Friday night, throwing like 4 interceptions. So that's just with the ACC in the standings, which we'll paint a picture here in a second. Miami's in there, and they have probably the strongest defense out of the rest of the ACC. And on paper they do, but there are some real concerns because they're just towards the back end of the year, they just don't appear to be showing up in these games where they should be. But nonetheless, they get a 38-10 win versus Syracuse. Louisville at number 18, they're also 7-2. They just got upset by California in overtime, 29-26. Previously, Louisville was number 10, so they dropped 8 spots. But I do have them in front of Miami because of the head-to-head. And if you looked at the stat sheet, and I was watching some of this game, California's quarterback, I'm not even going to pronounce his last name. I don't even want to do that. But he absolutely torched Louisiana's defense. He had over like 340 yards passing, like 2 or 3 touchdowns. He had 30 completions on like 47 attempts. I mean, he was balling. On the flip side, Miller Moss had a very subpar performance, and he was at home. So it's very concerning for these ACC teams. So, with that being said, and I want this to be made clear, I'm out on the ACC. I'm out. Even Georgia Tech. They're not winning the national championship this year. None of those teams are. We thought Miami was going to be something special. They had such a strong start to the season. Now it's just like, all right, like, yeah, sure, you might go 10-2, but are you really that scary? Because I look at a 9-3 SEC team or a potentially 9-3 Michigan team, or a potential 9-3 USC team, and I go, these teams would probably win. That's a hypothetical, though. We don't go off those, allegedly. But here are the ACC standings projections and my conference championship prediction. My first prediction is that Georgia Tech plays Virginia. And so, obviously, the question mark there is Virginia needs their quarterback back for their upcoming game versus Duke. But based on the schedule, based on the upcoming, I base all of this, I don't want to go too much into it, but I base these off of the remaining schedules for Virginia and all these ACC teams. But based off of that, I would say Virginia has the best chance to win out if they get their quarterback back. My second prediction is Georgia Tech versus Miami. Miami has to beat Pittsburgh on the road in Week 14 to do this. The rest of their games, I think they can win. I don't believe they are 500 opponents that they're playing besides Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh's has the toughest road. So I just eliminated them from the discussion because they're probably going to lose to Notre Dame. I know it's an outlier. But then the rest of their schedule, you're like, oof. Like, damn. So unless Pittsburgh just proves that they're the almighty ACC team, then, and I hope they do, but I don't see them overcoming Virginia or Miami in those two possibilities. And you'll notice that Georgia Tech's in all three of these. The rest of the Georgia Tech's games are gimmies. They should not drop them. And then, of course, at the end of the year, they play an in-state rivalry game against Georgia, which doesn't matter in terms of ACC conference standings. It doesn't. And then my third prediction is Georgia Tech versus SMU at 9-3. The only reason I have two of SMU's losses are Big 12 teams. Like I mentioned before, it was Baylor and TCU. Now within their conference, they're 5-1. So if they were to make it to 9-3 between Pittsburgh and SMU has a better chance to win out and play second with a tiebreaker over Miami because SMU beat Miami. I believe that should be how it works. You're bouncing around on me, damn. So those are my three predictions. Now, the most likely one, like I mentioned, is Georgia Tech versus Virginia in the ACC Conference Championship, to which I would believe Georgia Tech pulls out with a victory there. They're coming off a game versus Georgia. I'm sure they'll lose that one if I had to guess, knowing that I'm out on the ACC. So, all right. Tier 3. These are the outliers. These are the guys that, they don't really have a place in the conference championship besides BYU and Georgia Tech, or they're an independent. But nonetheless, they are good football teams. They are good programs. So number 17 is Utah. They're coming off a bye and a victory versus Cincinnati, in a big-time victory. It was a blowout. So their only two losses are to the two best teams in the Big 12. So I think they're the third best team in the Big 12. But there's no place for them in the college football playoff, realistically. Their losses are to Texas Tech and BYU, like I mentioned before. Number 16 is Michigan. There's really no place for them in the college football playoff unless they won out and beat Ohio State for the 5th year in a row. And that's going to be a game to watch for sure. But Michigan is the 5th best team in the Big Ten currently, and finishes their schedule with Ohio State in Week 14. And, my prediction is they finish 9-3 with the potential for a Ohio State upset at home, but that won't have any impact on the Big Ten championship, because by that time, like I mentioned before, Ohio State's schedule is such a gimme after their Washington game or whatever that they had like 6 or 7 weeks to prepare for Michigan's game. Playing Purdue and all these people, it's like, let's just prepare for Michigan in 6 weeks because, well, they're on our minds. They've beat us in 4 straight years. There was a COVID year where we didn't get to play, and then they broke an 8-game losing streak, Michigan did, in 2021. So that's going to be interesting because Michigan is not a bad program, like I mentioned. But they are led by a young quarterback. Julian Sain is also kind of on the younger side playing quarterback. There could be a potential for upset there, depending on the weather, depending on home and away, that sort of thing. So obviously, per usual, if you're a college football fan, that's something you definitely want to keep an eye on, especially if you're a Big Ten fan. But at the same time, it won't have an impact. I don't believe so. Unless Michigan won, they get to 10-2 hypothetically, and Michigan might squeeze into the college football playoff because they're more of a well-known nationally branded team, and those tend to get favor by the AP poll. So that'll be interesting to see. USC at 7-2, they're the 4th best team in the Big Ten currently in the standings. However, they have a pretty difficult remaining schedule. They go at Iowa, followed by at Oregon, and then they play UCLA at home. So I would say guaranteed one more win. But going at Iowa, we talked about it earlier, that's a very difficult game. Very, very difficult game. And USC is number 15 on the list, on the STS poll. So they've had some pretty impressive, win over Michigan, win over Nebraska, this, that, and the other. They played close with Notre Dame. Again, that's a rivalry game. That is an outlier. That does not count in the standings for the Big Ten, which is why they are ahead of Michigan and why Michigan isn't further back, because one of their losses is against Oklahoma on the road. So, again, when it comes to standings with Big Ten or any conference, those out-of-conference games do not have an impact. They do not, unless both those teams happen to play one another. So, my prediction is USC finishes 8-4. I think they can, if they drop to Iowa, I think they'll go 8-4 because I don't think they're beating Oregon on the road. BYU at 8-1, they're second in the Big 12. They're lost to Texas Tech by 2+ possessions. I don't think they have any media presence in the college football playoff. I don't believe they have any leeway. Last year they had a pretty solid year. They still didn't get in. This year it's very similar, and I still don't think they're going to get in. The separation factor, the differentiating factor that we saw with Texas Tech beating the absolute snot out of BYU, it was 29-0. They got a garbage time touchdown at the end. The mountain that BYU would have to climb, they get to play each other again, I'm sure, but the mountain that they would have to climb is pretty extravagant. And I was right, but I don't have any long-term confidence in a BYU team. I think they can play great within their conference. They can beat the snot out of some of these lower subpar Big 12 schools. But at the end of the day, when you get a team like Texas Tech, who I know hasn't been around as this powerhouse, but we've been watching their defense. We've been watching them without their backup quarterback. We still, truth be told, have not seen Texas Tech at their true potential because Baron Morton did not play well in this game. There was a lot of points left on the field versus BYU. But you had all these celebrities come in, College Game Day, all the lights were on, and that was the performance that they gave. Phenomenal. So, again, because of that, and if they lose the conference championship in the Big 12, I don't see them having a place in the college football playoff, unless I'm just crazy. Number 13 is the ACC leader. We already covered them, Georgia Tech. I think they have a pretty easy remaining schedule. They play Georgia at the end of the year. Doesn't really matter. Doesn't have any effect on the ACC standings or in the conference championship. They should be the leader and should be hosting as the home team or whatever as in the ACC championship game. Number 12 is the Independent, the last outlier. Number 12 is Notre Dame. Now, I posted a hilarious meme. If you haven't seen the Sydney Sweeney thing where the chick's talking to her and then she completely mogs her about issues that she wants to speak on, that face is iconic. She was already like top notch, obviously. Now she's just the best. So she became 1,000 times more attractive than she already was with that clip. So the meme was pretty popular, but I'm thinking like, so wait, Notre Dame's top 10 now, right? Because, these other teams are losing. No, I made a vow. I will not kneel. I made a vow that they will not enter the top 10. And I know you're probably thinking that is just pure distaste. It's wrong. It's biased. It's whatever. What bias would it be? Other than just like distaste for Notre Dame, which yes, I admittedly do. And I've covered it before on multiple episodes. I have an episode titled The Whining Irish. Go listen to it, please. And so they play Boston College, who's 1-8. They poorly beat them 25-10. Then this week, it's like we got a nationally televised game versus Navy, and they beat them 49-10. And it's raining or it's snowing there. It's really cool. Like, holy crap, like this environment's cool. Like, so now they're going to play at Pittsburgh for College game day. And I still don't think that, it's a difficult game, sure, because they're 7-2, but Pittsburgh was not supposed to be 7-2. Let's be real with ourselves. It just happened to be that way. And they can't control, actually they can. They're the only team that technically can control their schedule. So that's why I vow, there's some short additional reasons why I have vowed not to put them in the top 10. So, but that puts us into tier 2. And tier 2 is interesting because the Texas Longhorns made a jump after their bye week. They were like number 16 last week. And they're 4-1 in the SEC so far. And they've got a big game versus Georgia. Oklahoma's got a big game versus Oklahoma. Vanderbilt has a big game at the end of the year versus Tennessee. And so I have number 11, Vanderbilt, number 10, Oklahoma, and number 9, Texas. Texas has the head-to-head win over Oklahoma. Oklahoma has, the win versus Tennessee and the loss versus Texas. And then Vanderbilt they have barely botted by and escaped versus Auburn. Allowing 38 points versus Auburn is a little weird, a little concerning. They got boat raced by Texas. So they win that head-to-head as well. So Texas has beaten both number 10 on my list and number 11. So that's something to consider. In Texas, I know you Texas fans are probably super excited that I put them in the top 10 because last week I heard a lot of complaints. I did not put them there because of the complaints. I don't receive pressure like that. I take a lot of pride in this list, and I own everything that I create. I look at that and I said, well, I have a reason for everything that I do. I have a reason I put Texas at number 9. And when I look at Texas and Oklahoma, they're both very similar teams on paper. Their offense has been lethargic, lackluster, not what it was born, bred, and believed to be in the preseason. Well, you could argue Oklahoma's was. Texas's absolutely was not for the first 6 or 7, 8 weeks. But then over the course of time, Texas's offense has gotten better. It's still, on paper, it looks better. You see a 70-yard touchdown, then you saw what the touchdown was. They do a lot of, their play calling is very schematically to protect, to basically not make a mistake. OU's is aggressive. They're going to try and take risks. They're going to do that, but they just don't get a lot of separation with the receivers. It's a very young, supportive cast, and their offensive line is not as strong as a Texas offensive line. But I would say OU plays to win. They don't look as good doing it. Texas plays to lose, but they look better than OU doing it. Plays not to lose. So, and I still think Vanderbilt, I think they're good. I think they're better than, Georgia Tech, BYU, USC, those types of teams. That's definitely why I have them in front. But in terms of SEC, there's just a lot that goes into it. But while I'm here, we're going to round out the rest of the list. Let's do this. While I'm here, number 8, Oregon. Texas Tech, we're going to come back to the SEC, okay? We're going to come back to the SEC. I had a theory on how I was going to do it. Now I know how I'm going to do it. Number 8 is Oregon. Jumping Oregon is Texas Tech. Now, this is not because Oregon had a very close game at Iowa in the cold snow and won on a game-winning field goal, 18-16. I expected that to happen. I am not going to take away from Oregon because of that. That's not why I'm doing it. I am doing it because Texas Tech looked so much more impressive than any other Big 12 team that they don't get the media bias that they deserve. They don't get the media recognition, more accurately put, than that they deserve. Texas Tech could arguably be number 6 on this list, ahead of Ole Miss. But because if they were undefeated, they would be number 6. But they lost that game with the backup. I know, I've already covered it, like the missed opportunities that they had and how well the defense played, and all things considered, and the time of possession differential. Texas Tech has looked uncomparable to the rest of the Big 12. Let's just put it that way. They've blown out every competitor on their list. So I expect them to win the Big 12 championship. And then some of these teams in front of them, number 6, Ole Miss, number 5, Georgia, and number 4, Alabama. 3 of those teams, they could drop a game. Georgia has a tough game at home versus Texas. Thankfully, it's at home. Alabama has a tough game at home versus Oklahoma. That's a tough game. And Ole Miss checks notes. I'm telling you, there's just so much. Ole Miss's remaining schedule is Florida at home, bye week, then they go at Mississippi State. The only trap game I see in there is at Mississippi State, because Mississippi State can score a lot of points, and Ole Miss's defense in the SEC tends to give up some points. So, barring something crazy, I don't see Ole Miss losing. But again, there's a threat there, right? Georgia. There's 2 threats there. They play Texas, and they play Georgia Tech at the end of the year. Maybe Georgia Tech surprises somebody. Alabama, they're playing Oklahoma this week. Next week, they play another team I think they play one more matchup because, they play a rivalry game versus at Auburn. I know. Y'all are looking at it saying there's no way they lose to Auburn. That is a rivalry game. It is. Alabama's far superior. I think they're going to kick the snot out of them. So, with a win over Oklahoma, they have secured, in my opinion, the SEC championship. Against who? Well, let's get there. Number 3, Indiana. I'm going to come back to them. Number 2, Texas A&M. The AP poll finally got it right. The only SEC undefeated team. I've mentioned that before. People are like, no. Like, Alabama's also undefeated in the SEC. No. The only SEC team in general that has not lost a game, no matter what it is. That's super impressive. They haven't played anybody. What? They haven't played anybody? You're crazy. Number 1, Ohio State. Ohio State, like I mentioned before, after that Washington game, you don't have to watch them. You can turn on, if you like the Bengals, you can turn on the Bengals and watch Joe Flacco throw for 400 yards. Like, they've got 6 or 7 weeks to game plan for Michigan. So no need to put eyes on them. They're going to be undefeated until Michigan, and then we'll see what happens there. But even if they lose that game, they're still going to play Indiana. But if they lose the game versus Michigan and Indiana wins out, then Indiana's going to be number 1 at the end of the year. Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. That's not right. If Indiana wins out the rest of the year and Ohio State loses to Michigan, and additionally Texas A&M wins out, which is more difficult than the rest, then A&M will be number 1 and Indiana number 2 and Ohio State number 3. Just prepare for that. I know Big Ten has a pretty big head, so I'm sorry if that pisses you off, but yes, I prefer an SEC schedule. And we can go into that as to why. on a different show. But yeah, going back to Indiana, look, holy crap. Did you guys watch this football game? Did you watch it? Not the clip, not like, oh, here's the catch or whatever. The drive. Penn State up by 4. No timeouts left for Indiana. The punt back and touchback 20-yard line. No timeouts. Like a minute 54 remaining. Mendoza was seaming the football down the field. These are second-level throws, pass the linebackers, touch ball. They look like Dak Prescott throws to Jake Ferguson or something like that. Like, Dak Prescott is really good at throwing the seam route in the NFL. It's gotten to be his speciality, right? Some of you might disagree, but if you watch a lot of Dak Prescott, that's what he does. Mendoza was doing this. Gets all the way down the field to get into the red zone. I believe his last name was Decker, the wide receiver. Tall, lengthy, Alec Pierce-looking wide receiver. Mosses the guy. Toe tap catch inside the 10. Now, this is where the bend don't break defense comes in for Penn State. And Penn State has good football players. We're not going to kid ourselves. For you guys, if anybody is sitting there saying, oh, Penn State was 3-5 and, Indiana should beat the crap out of them at 9-0. This is one of those games that, and Ohio State did play them and played them better. But going into Penn State is a very difficult environment. Playing against that roster is a very difficult thing to do. So for this, it was a trap game. It was a big time trap game. And so the drive, though, how they finish the game, what are they going to do when they're behind? What are they going to do in a close game? We saw what they're going to do in a close game against Oregon. They're going to finish strong. That's what they did against Penn State. They finished strong. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I don't need the STS poll anymore. And so watching this, the toe tap catch, the call by Gus Johnston, and Joel Klatt primarily covers the Big Ten, so he kind of has a big head for the Big Ten. I think he has a little bit more of a bias for the Big Ten. He kind of rambled on about how impressive Penn State's environment was, and I was like, relax. And they are, yes, it's a good environment, but they're 3-5, and they lost their starting quarterback. So they didn't kill Goliath, okay? And the throw, the toe tap, the miraculous catch, the call by Gus Johnston, it was incredible. And like I mentioned in the beginning episode, like Georgia, Tennessee, top 3 game of the year, right? This is in there. This is in the top 3 games of the year. That last drive was everything you want to love about college football. It was everything. The pressure on Mendoza, the pressure for the College Football Playoff Committee, the pressure everywhere. And for him to make that miraculous catch in the end zone, which the toe tap, having the front leg look like it's going to touch first, potentially out of bounds, and then it's being lifted up and the back leg touches, secures the catch, game over. Dude. And then if you watched after that, Penn State's drive had a lot of missed calls officiating-wise. There was a lot, and it was poorly managed. They called their timeout after getting a first down when they could have spiked it with like 20 seconds left. That was a critical error because they had a shot to get a field goal. They removed it with that timeout. That was a little suspicious, but that's an interim head coach. He may not be experienced in those scenarios. He's bound to make those mistakes probably. But again, if this is your first time seeing the STS poll from me, is this your first time tuning into the episode? Indiana's been behind A&M on my list for 2 weeks now. So they did not move. I didn't move them anywhere. I didn't jump A&M over them. That was 2 weeks ago. So hold your horses there. And like I promised, I want to go back to the SEC because like last year, I had an episode titled SEC Chaos because there was so much to go through. Because with how strong the SEC conference is and how competitive their conference is and their schedules and the strength of schedules, there is going to be, whether you like it or not, there is going to be a media bias. And so last year, there's no such thing as an undefeated SEC team anymore unless A&M does it this year. Then it's miraculous, right? There's going to be so many 10-2, 9-3, 11-1 teams in the SEC. And that's very impressive, right? The question is, with 12 teams in the college football playoff, what teams are in and what teams are out? And which resume speaks for itself over some of the other teams I have on the STS poll that are recognizable brands that, they might be 10-2, but a 9-3 team might be more impressive, such as an Oklahoma who beat a Michigan if Michigan ended up 10-2. So there's going to be chaos coming up. So and they're part of tier 2, right? The second tier, as I call it, in SEC play. The current standings, you got A&M at number 1, they're 6-0. Bama's number 2, they're 6-0 as well. Georgia's is 6-1. Fourth place is Ole Miss at 5-1. Texas only has one loss in the SEC, they're 4-1. Vanderbilt's 4-2. Oklahoma's 3-2, and at 8th place is Tennessee at 3-3. So Tennessee's out. Oklahoma, with their remaining schedule, they're most likely out unless they just shock the world. Vanderbilt, they take one more L, which I believe it'll be at Tennessee in the final game of the year. They will have their third loss. I believe they're out. But that still remains 5 SEC teams that are in contention. Because like I mentioned earlier, with Ole Miss and Georgia and Bama, if Bama and Georgia win their next game, then it's kind of cemented. They both have 7 wins. And then Georgia's done with SEC play. Georgia's last SEC game is Texas. If they win that game, they're cemented at 7-1. If Bama wins their next game, they're cemented at 7-1 with the tiebreaker over Georgia. So they could drop their final game versus Auburn, and nobody would bat an eye. A&M, if they win versus South Carolina at home and get to 7-0, they are cemented. So those 3 teams more than likely are going to be playoff teams. You're going to have, and where Georgia gets ranked in the college football playoff, that's up for the selection committee to decide. I'll be doing a college football playoff bracketology towards the end of November and probably early December, probably when the Army-Navy week. So externally, let's dive into this some more. Vanderbilt, 8-2. They got a week 12 bye. Then they play Kentucky at home, then they go to Tennessee. All eyes, right? I project Tennessee wins that football game. I think they'll be hungry for a win. I think Vanderbilt is slipping quite a little bit. They had a poor performance versus Texas. They had an interesting performance versus Auburn. Not many teams give up. The only other team to give up like 27 plus points to Auburn was Arkansas. And that's because Arkansas allows 70 points a game. So I don't know. So for Vanderbilt to allow 38, the most points to Auburn, I think this team is starting to slip a little bit. But nonetheless, they won. So going into Tennessee, I think that offensive firepower that Josh Heupel and Joey Aguilar have could be a little bit too much for Vanderbilt to muster. And please, for the love of God, if Tennessee could just buckle up on defense and make a stop, they win that football game at home. And then they're 9-3. Now, they're out. Tennessee's going to be out. What is there to play for? I don't know, but they're going to want a chance, right? So that'll be interesting to see. Oklahoma, 7-2. They go at Bama, then they play Missouri at home, then they play LSU at home. So there's a third loss somewhere in there. I can feel it in me bones, lad. There's a third loss coming in there. And once that happens, they're out. Oklahoma's out. And I will say this from the mountaintop. If Oklahoma finishes 9-3, that is a very, very, very impressive year per their strength of schedule. And then all the additional stuff you want to add in there, like the lack of weapons or on offense or production on offense or their offensive line struggles. 9-3. If you make it to that is impressive. If they steal a win from Bama, then they have a much better chance of finishing 10-2. I don't think that'll happen. Let's watch. More than likely, they'll be 9-3, 8-4. More than likely. Texas at 7-2. They go at Georgia. They play at home versus Arkansas. Then they play at home versus Texas A&M on a Friday night, the day after Thanksgiving, versus a pending undefeated Texas A&M football team. So I think their second SEC loss is coming. Then once that happens, Texas cannot play for an SEC championship. They would be out because Alabama and Georgia and Ole Miss are going to keep winning, more than likely. So out of those 4 teams, the 2 teams would be Texas A&M and Alabama most likely. But pegs the question: if Texas finishes 9-3, 10-2, are they considered for a playoff spot? If Oklahoma finishes 9-3 with their better strength of schedule, are they preferred over Texas? Well, remember there was a head-to-head. Texas won that head-to-head. Oh, and then what about Vanderbilt? If Vanderbilt finishes 9-3 or 10-2, like with the same record as Texas in the SEC, what would be? Well, Texas has the head-to-head over Vanderbilt. So more stuff to consider there. Plus, the national brand of Texas is so much more vast than a Vanderbilt or arguably an Oklahoma. So I think that'll be interesting as well. I believe what everybody's probably thinking, other than Texas fans, is that they'll probably lose to Georgia on the road and they'll probably lose to A&M at home because A&M looks better on paper. That's a rivalry game. That is a 50-50. Texas has Texas A&M's number majority of the time. And then externally, or I should say additionally, if A&M beat South Carolina, they wouldn't have as much to play for rather than the pride of it being a rivalry game, the hunger to beat their rivalry. So that's something to put a question mark over too, because it's like, all right, well, like, you know, Texas versus A&M kind of thing. Like, well, you know, A&M's already in the SEC championship, whether they win or lose. So, yeah, we'll play this game, but we're not going to play it. Like, we're going to rest our guys. We're going to do a lot of rotations and just see how it goes. And if we lose, then hopefully it'll be a close game. I don't think A&M would do that, but that's something to consider. And I don't think Mike Elko would do that. But you never know. You never know with these coaches these days. So more than likely, I think 9-3, 8-4 for Texas. I think if they're 9-3, they have an argument to get into the national championship, or sorry, to get into the college football playoff because of their close game with Ohio State. And we've seen from the AP poll that they don't really knock Texas for that margin of loss. They don't. So, my SEC championship prediction is Texas A&M versus Alabama. I think Texas A&M will be 11-1 or 12-0, and Alabama will be 11-1. So, I don't know, man. Again, this is going to turn into SEC chaos here pretty soon. And there's a way for one of the 3 teams that I have at number 9, 10, and 11. Texas, Oklahoma, and Vanderbilt. There is a way that just one, maybe 2, depending on, I mean, none of them play each other to end the season. But if they all won out, this is where the chaos started. Like really, really comes into fold. If they all went out, and this is a very low probability, and they're all 3, 10-2, all those teams are going to make it into the college football playoffs. And then you guys are going to be pissed. You Big Ten guys, you ACC guys, you're going to be pissed because I talked about it earlier. No one's talking about this. The ACC is not impressive this year. They're not. So would you rather have 3 10-2 SEC teams make it to the college football playoff, or would you rather have a couple 3-loss, 2-loss ACC teams make it to the college football playoff? All you're going to have in there is the ACC conference championship winner. Outside of that, those other guys, they're out. They're out. I'm telling you. And if they're in, it's a mistake. It's a mistake. And then additionally, the BYU, right? So, and if Notre Dame dropped a game, you know, versus Pittsburgh this weekend, or that's about it. But then you can't put them. You can't, my opinion, you cannot put a 9-3 Notre Dame team in there with the 3 losses that they have. You cannot, because Pittsburgh, whether they win against Notre Dame or lose, they're probably not going to finish as a ranked football team. So the Miami loss got worse after SMU beat them and Louisville beat them. The A&M win or loss got much, much better because A&M kept winning. So there's two sides of the coin there for Notre Dame. But again, they do not play a conference championship. So they're an outlier. So whether they're kind of considered like, well, we got to throw them in because why? Because why? What have they done? Their best accomplishment this year is beating USC at home in the rain. That's their best accomplishment this year. We're like, oh, what are their best losses? What the hell is a best loss? I've never gone on that, to my knowledge. I've never gone on that. So I think if that happens, Notre Dame's out, the SEC teams are in. You know what? Probably 2 out of 3 of those teams. I think the media loves Notre Dame and they'll throw them in. But I think Texas, OU, and Vanderbilt, all 3 of them win. There's a good chance all 3 get in, barring Notre Dame winning out, which I'm sure they will. Then 2 of the 3 teams will get in. So we'll get into that later in a new episode, coming up this later in November. But all things considered, it's going to get really fun. It's going to get super exciting. I'm enjoying every minute of it. And if you made it this far in the episode, I'm super excited to see how you guys are going to react to the present I had to give y'all in December, on December 1st. So I'm telling y'all, I think it's going to be it's a great plan. It's just going to be good. I don't want to give any clues, but 2026 is going to look, we've started to gain some traction. 2026 is going to look really cool. I've got fun ideas that I will reveal to you guys in due time. I think we've established our niche, at least mine, to be a college football analyst. And I know in the future that a lot like some other guys they're doing what I'm doing. I know in the future I'm going to get the non-player accusations and say, this dude's never coached, this dude's never played college football. He doesn't have any credentials that back up his opinions. That doesn't mean I don't know how to evaluate the game. It just does not. And you ask anybody that I know whether I know ball, and let them speak for me in that regard. I just hope you guys are entertained. I hope to find some unique ways to keep y'all engaged and entertained. I'm not somebody that's ever going to be bought and paid for by some large corporation. If anything, I would do a partnership with somebody just, to gain some emphasis on some different points of view. But my mission, excuse me, my mission is to create a network, and to say, at the Shadow the Script Network, we have a primary show, we have a contributor show, we have a third contributor show, and we have a fantasy football show. Excuse me. So things like that. I want to cover all aspects, but I tell you what I'm not going to have. I'm not going to have fat dudes with scruffy beards. I'm not going to have degeneracy on my channel. I'm not going to be asking for your money. I'm not going to be like your Barstool. I'm not going to be like On 3. I like On 3, but I'm going to be different in some sort of way. I'm going to find it, that I'm going to be different. I really prioritize being authentic, generous. But one thing I've just always dreamed of doing, and it's a goal of mine once this channel gains enough traction, is, I want to get you guys involved in a fun way. I want the audience to say, I like his channel because he engages with me in the comments, or he gives me an access that rewards me in a certain way. Whether that's a sponsorship that gets you 30% off or something, or hey, like you get first row seats to your favorite team's college football matchup or something cool, right? And so I want to keep y'all engaged as much as I can. But I really appreciate the support so far. I've had such a fun time with covering college football. There's no burnout for me. Like I said, I'm exclusively college football now. I don't really cover NFL. I'm just so burned out on NFL. I think the product has been really bad, and it's so unpredictable. And it's like I'm doing these top 10 rankings for NFL teams, and I'm like, I don't really care. Like they've all been playing at such a level that you can't really tell. So anyway, with college football, like doing the top 25 poll, the bracketology coming up, and then in the offseason, hopefully getting some guests to pique you guys' interest. I think that's going to be the way forward. I ask that you respect my decision. But anyway, this has been Week 12 STS poll analysis from the Shadow of the Script podcast. I'm your host, Jared May. If you're staying this long, make sure to follow all the socials. You can find them in the links in our bios. These episodes are always available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts to watch or listen. Thank you guys for the support. See y'all next week as we get closer to college football playoff. There's a ton to look forward to. All right, boys. Deuces.